Hello and welcome to A Spirited Debate. I'm Lauren Green. Despite not being front and center in the news, the fate of Christians in the Middle East at the hands of ISIS is still horrible. Father Benedict Kiely just returned from Iraq, where he surveyed the wrath of Islamic terrorists, churches burned out, crosses riddled with bullets, and Christian homes destroyed and booby-trapped. What should and can be done? Father Kiely, founder of Nazarene.org, joins me now. Welcome.
Thank you, Lauren.
So what's your overall impression of what you saw in Iraq?
It's unfortunately very depressing. I would love to be able to say that things look very hopeful, but in fact, strangely, one of the nuns said to me, it's more hopeless now after some of the villages have been liberated and towns, because they've seen the destruction. When you go back and see that your house has been burnt out, your church has been destroyed, the cross, everywhere I went, the cross is defaced, is shot at, is scratched out. It was an extraordinary experience to see the hatred of the cross from these Islamists. And so it was rather depressing. People just don't know what the future is going to bring.
You know, one of the things that you wrote about in an article, it said there were pilfered graves of Christians. I mean, they couldn't just even leave the dead alone. They actually unearthed the graves. Why?
It's extraordinary. It's not funny, but it's extraordinary because even in death, the Christians were not left alone. They literally dug up the graves. They smashed the gravestones, of course, because the cross is on the gravestones, and they literally dug up bodies, threw them away, beheaded one body. In one of the churches, they dug up the body of the priest, and no one knows where his body is. I felt that a wave, a black cloud of almost demonic hatred had just swept through the Nineveh plain, and there's a great evil behind all of this, and we mustn't pretend there isn't.
You know, speaking of the great evil, you know, you point on your article, and I really have to bring these things up because it's just so unbelievable that these things are happening, that even in liberated areas, people returning could still be maimed or killed because ISIS has left booby traps in common items like a TV remote control or a vacuum cleaner. I mean, who knows this is all happening?
It doesn't seem to be part of the news cycle. They can't go home. They can't go home because the fields are full of mines, which is in most war areas. But yes, they deliberately left little gifts for the poor people coming back if they open the door. The priest in his rectory, they put a little bomb right by the door that he would go out of his office onto his deck. Luckily it was removed, but no, it's really a very, very impossible situation. And but also they're not even safe. Some of the people coming out of Mosul now, some of the so-called refugees, are ISIS. So they're coming into the towns again, not into the Christian camps, but they're leaking out. And they feel they can't go home because their neighbors betrayed them. Their neighbors stole their houses and literally betrayed some of them. So how can you live with your neighbor who's betrayed you?
Now, you asked the priest if this is representative of Islam, and I think the stark kind of answer he came back with was really surprising. What did he say?
I asked exactly that question, is this real Islam? Without a second, without a quarter of a second, yes. He said, this is what we've lived with for centuries. It comes in waves. There are waves of persecution. This is what I think a lot of our listeners and readers and viewers don't realize, that there are waves of persecution. Then the Christians are sort of second-class citizens for a while, then another wave. This is the most violent wave, of course, since 1915 or so, the great genocide. And it is a genocide. But he feels that it's impossible to live with. They have to have a completely separate existence, protected existence, otherwise they will have to leave. You
know, moderate Muslims and a lot of the Muslims living here in the country say, you know, this is a type of Islam that's really not representative of the faith itself, that others say, you know, the sin is in us, and these people are, you know, demonic, and they're using the religion to spread their demonic kind of life. I mean, what do you say to that?
I suggest they haven't read the Quran, because the ISIS is following a literal interpretation of the Quran, of the seven. It's an authentic interpretation. Now, that does not mean all Muslims, of course, are violent. Most are not. But it is an authentic version of Islam that is being practiced. It's a nonsense to say this is not Islam. If it's not Islam, what is it? Is it Quakerism? Is it Christian Science? It's Islam. It is a form of Islam. But that's a nonsense, absolute nonsense.
And of course, this debate is going to be going on for a while because the West really doesn't have that interpretation, and we keep getting the feeling that Islam is a peaceful religion, and because many Muslims are peaceful, and we can certainly have that debate at length. But I wanted to get to the point of, is the West ignoring this? I mean, and why do you think?
Absolutely. I think mainly, or even partially, but mainly in Europe, it's because the European governments are secular now. Europe is a very secular continent, and religion is a problem. Really, secularists look at religion as a problem to be solved. Islamophobia, we're condemned. Everything I've just said, I would probably be condemned as being Islamophobic, certainly in England. They also don't understand conversion. This is very important with terrorist incidents, that we constantly hear of the lone wolf. He was a criminal before, he was a drug dealer, so he's not really an Islamist. He was converted, and only a believer understands what we have conversion in Christianity. A believer understands you're changed. So this man, he may have been a drug dealer or a pimp or something, but then he was converted, so he became a Muslim. The West can't understand that. And yes, they're leaving the Christians behind. If I could answer that why, Lauren, I'd be, I would be very happy, but I don't understand it. But it's very disturbing.
To find out more information, you could go to Nazarene.org.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Father Kiely, for being here, and thank you for joining me very much. This is very depressing news in a sense.
I'm sorry to depress you, Lauren. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us, too, but if you want to check out my new book, Lighthouse Faith, God is a Living Reality in a World Immersed in Fog. And for the latest headlines, stick with FoxNews.com. I'm Lauren Green, and thanks for watching A Spirited Debate.